You know, when I was a kid, my family had this long-standing tradition that on Memorial Day we'd go out to an old pioneer cemetery out in the middle of nowhere, and we would take flowers and we would lay them at the gravestones of some of our relatives. One of those gravestones in particular was my Grandpa Killingsworth, my mom's dad. I never really actually had a relationship with him. See, because he died when I was 3 years old. I have this memory of him laying in bed and being sick, and this memory of him having a bowl of butterscotch candy sitting on the nightstand next to his bed. But I don't actually have a memory of a relationship with him. I know things about him. I've learned things. I know that he was a naval vet in World War II, and he worked on an aircraft carrier, and I know he was a good man that loved his wife and loved his family. But death did more than take his life from us. It took that possibility of a relationship that I could have had with him. A lot of times when we think of death, we think of just life ending. And really, what death does is it takes relationships away from us. There's a central theme throughout the Bible, and it actually is death. See, in Genesis 1:1, the very beginning of the Bible, it says that God created the heavens and the earth. Here's God, and He creates. He brings life. So the very first theme we see in the Bible is life. You know, I like to think of it as God taking a paintbrush and dips it in a bucket, and with a really broad stroke, He paints all of the planets, the universe, the heavens, and the earth. And then he takes his brush and dips it into another bucket, and he paints all of the landscape. The mountains and volcanoes, the prairies and the plains. He takes that paintbrush and he dips it into another, and he paints all of the vegetation, the plants, the trees, the shrubs. Takes his brush again and he dips it in, and he paints all of the animals, the deer and the fox, the weasel, the fish, the eagle in the sky. And then he takes his paintbrush and he puts it down. And like a true artist, he takes his hands and he digs down into the dirt. And he takes the dirt and he forms it into the likeness of man. And then he takes this creation, this man that he made with his bare hands, and he breathes life into it. He takes the man and he makes woman from it, makes Eve. So he has Adam and Eve. And here we see of all of the creation that God has taken Adam and Eve, He's taken mankind, and He says, this is the intimate one I want to be with. So He develops a relationship with Adam and Eve. The first theme we see in the Bible is life. So we have Adam and Eve in the garden with God. And we know that they knew the sound of God in the garden, and so they must have walked with God and talked with God throughout the garden. And they developed this relationship. God had given them all of the garden to live in. He said, you can eat from any of these wonderful and perfect and righteous trees that I've made, all these plants that bear fruit. He says that there's one that you cannot eat from. This tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He says, because if you eat from that, if you taste its fruit, you'll die. So I think we all know the story. The tempter came and Adam and Eve ate the fruit. And in this bite of this succulent fruit, and in this willful act of rebellion, we have death that enters the world. This relationship that God had had with man, where everything was perfect, where man could dwell in the very presence of God, where there was nothing between man and God, that they were together. With that act, there comes this chasm, this deep, dark, uncrossable chasm that now opens up between man and God. And man looks out and says, God, I'm so far from you. And God, I can't get across this chasm. And God looks down. And I'm sure with great sorrow, probably the same feeling of loss that we have when we visit this place. He looks at man and he says, why? And so death came and entered the world. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about how death plays a role in our relationship with God. I would hope that over the next 3 weeks we could change your thoughts on death. That we would begin to think of death not just as the ending of life, but as the renewed relationship, as a celebration of sacrifice, as a eternal living. It's the upside of death, where out of death comes life.